is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
Welcome, everybody. Clay Ferraro here. Ira Winderman out enjoying Tinseltown. And, if you see the bags under his eyes a little bit, it's because you know that he was out partying late night in L.A.
You know what? Not that, but I do have a question for you because I didn't have time to run over to the Starbucks, so I'm doing the dreaded in-room coffee right now. Is powdered creamer even a thing? I mean, you get the coffee set up here. I actually bring my own Starbucks with me, but you make the coffee, and then you look, and they got this powdered creamer. What? I don't want to go Seinfeld on you, but what's with the powdered creamer? Like, who thought this was a good idea? So you put in the sugar in there, and then you put in this other stuff in there, and they don't even call it creamer. They call it lightener. As if, like, no, we have nothing to do with the cow. This is just a bunch of chemicals. So I'm going to be sitting here drinking my chemicals, but I honestly think as much as we're going to talk about Markieff Morris, the Heat road trip, Jimmy Butler's big game the other night, this whole powdered creamer thing, at some point we have to get to also. But please, I digress.
It's like when you, it's like this new age thing when you look on the ingredient list for stuff and it says that natural cane juice is an ingredient. No, it's sugar. It's sugar. Like let's be honest about this.
The ingredients on this just said on this it said in the back of the package just contains stuff. So whatever. I'm drinking some stuff, but let's get back to the hoops. First of all, and Clay, I listened to O's show a little before when we came on this morning on Pallet Rock City Inside the Paint. I do agree with him. I think when we all went back and looked at the Markieff Morris play, Clay, and this is something I thought about even before I saw the degree of the foul that Markieff Morris did, whether you thought it was a take foul or something else, was this. Why do that? It's a 17-point game. There's 2.5 minutes to go. Yes, 2 nights earlier, Utah had a big comeback in roughly that time frame, but it doesn't happen. You don't do a take foul then. You do a take foul when your lead is only 5 and there's 2 minutes to go and the other team's going to score an easy basket and you're not in the bonus and they're going to inbound on the side. I get it. What was he thinking or not thinking?
What it appeared to me, Ira, was there was some frustration there, not just because of the game, but because of also, I was really surprised that the officials didn't call a foul on Jokic when he hit Bam underneath. I mean, it looked like he hit him fairly hard. Mm-hmm. Not that it would rise. So it almost seemed like it was a combination frustration of the game, frustration of that foul not being called. This is the distinction that I want to make here.
Sure.
Nobody here is saying that what Jokic did was justified. Like I think what would have been justified, retaliation, I don't think anybody would have had a problem with.
Right. What
was to me disgusting is going and just clubbing somebody in the back while they're walking away. And Ira, this is, to me, and this is just my opinion,
sure,
I feel like the reaction to this would have been different if Jokic had walked right up to Morris, tapped him on the shoulder, let Morris turn around, see him, and then hauled off and punched him in the face. Like, I think that would have almost been more acceptable than going up and clubbing somebody in the back.
You've been watching too much hockey.
Yeah, well, exactly. And see, look, I just feel like there are levels to, and look, even when Jokic was meeting with the media, which again, you and I talked about the fact that they met with the media and Heat players did not, Jokic even said that he saw Morris coming. He said he was expecting a lighter foul. He was just expecting a typical personal take foul.
Right.
He didn't expect the level that Morris took it to. So let's make this distinction here. What Morris did was over the top. It was wrong. If you want to call it dirty, I'm not going to have any problem with that. What Jokic did was worse. And to me, it was significantly worse because it was somebody who did not see it coming. And sure, you can make the argument that maybe Morris shouldn't have turned his back. He should have expected something. But to me, it would have been far different if whatever Jokic had done to Morris would have been something that he would have allowed Morris to see coming. And to me, that's the distinction there I think you have to make.
And it's interesting, Clay, because you have the hockey jersey behind you. And as you know, in hockey, there's a certain honor code.
Yes.
And when a player is facing the glass or the boards, you don't check him because it's very dangerous with a little dasher board that runs along. That's where a lot of concussions happen. It's sort of a known kind of thing.
Right.
I think Nikola Jokic just acted instinctively. He was angry. He just tried to shove, a general shove. But again, when you shove and you're 7 feet and 285 pounds, it's not your general typical shove. He knew as soon as he saw Markieff's neck snap backwards that this was not a good thing.
Yes.
And I'm not so sure I've ever seen from a basketball-related play, a player being listed as out due to whiplash. Look, players have been in car accidents. We all understand that. We see the commercials. We have a bunch of terrific personal injury attorneys in South Florida advertising everywhere. I understand that whiplash factor. I don't think I've ever seen it on a basketball court. That's what made it that unusual. Like Big O said, I would not have been surprised if Markieff Morris was also suspended. I would not have been aghast at it. I am a little surprised because of the, like you point out, Clay, the intensity of the foul, the violence of the play, the result that it only was one game. And I think the league took into account that he wasn't the instigator, but he was the retaliator. So I guess therefore, but I honestly thought, I spoke to someone earlier in the day when the league was going through this, and I asked him, what do you think? And he says, well, we've spoken to the league. We expect fines for both the Heat players and a multiple game suspension for Jokic. So I'm not so sure that the reason it came out at 10 o'clock last night, very unusual time for the NBA, is they didn't negotiate down Nikola Jokic's penalty as well. And Clay, and we'll get into this also, I know we got a lot to get to today, and I think the social media aspect did not help either, because I think the league saw this thing going incredibly sideways between the Morris brothers and the Jokic brothers, and to a place where, hey, these teams are going to meet in just a little over 2 weeks right now.
And to me, Ira, I was almost expecting, and maybe this was expecting too much, that he would be suspended up until that game down here. And just to me,
probably a bit too much, yeah.
But look, I mean, see, even some of the comments are taking issue with the fact I said that that he got clubbed in the back, and somebody said, Morris is now soft because of what happened. Like, no, man, like you have somebody who is huge and strong. And, Jokic probably goes out there and bench presses logs. I mean, so when you have somebody running up with this full force and hitting somebody in the back, and Ira, I think you're right. I do think there was a part of me in the moment, and this is again we're not trying to be homers here. There was a part of me in the moment, and then hearing Jokic afterward, I legitimately felt badly for him because I felt like to you, and again, just a small part of me, but I feel like what you said was true in that in that moment, he didn't realize his own strength. He knew that he had gone further than he had meant to go. Right. And I did feel badly for him in that respect, but that doesn't change what happened and the fact that it was a blatant cheap shot. And again, this is not absolving Markieff Morris, but the level of the retaliation was the problem.
It was who did it. Now, let's be honest. If he wasn't on the Miami Heat and another team, I think if you and I were to sit down, we'll probably do this exercise at some time along the way here in the Pallet Rack City inside the Paint Show, is that if we were to talk about the top 5 or 10 NBA instigators, they might not have their own rank on the list, but Morris brothers would wind up pretty high on that list. I think you'd agree. So I think the NBA looked at this also to a degree as a recidivist, as someone who's been here before, as someone who has instigated before. Honestly, has instigated against the Heat. We saw a little bit of that in the 2020 NBA Finals when Markieff was with the Lakers. So I think that always factors in. And you know this. You know this especially from hockey. Guys who are seen as repeat offenders get harsher punishments, and guys who retaliate against repeat offenders sometimes are let off the hook. So I think, I don't know if this is the right phrasing, but I'm not so sure that someone in the NBA security office didn't go, that Morris guy's a jerk. I can understand what Jokic did because I got a list from here to there about things that Marcus and Markieff have done already. I think that factored into it also. I think, matter of fact, I would put it this way. If Jokic's play came against Tyler Herro, for example, I think it might have been multiple games. As babyface Tyler Herro, new dad, you got to be nice to him. But I think because it came against Markieff Morris, they're like, well, the dude had it coming to him because that's how he plays. That's part of it also. If Jokic did it against Udonis Haslem, there wouldn't have been any penalty. Of course, there would have been blood, but that's another story.
And we get another comment, RB Blanco, saying Jokic did nothing wrong. I firmly disagree with that. And
but he did what he had to. But he did what he had to do to a degree, Clay.
Again, I have no problem with retaliating. Like none. Right. But to me, it all goes back to there is a line that you do not cross, and he crossed that line. And it's kind of, you mentioned the honor code in hockey, but it's just being a man. It's like look at somebody or make sure somebody is looking at you when you were going to take that shot. And like I said, Jokic even admitted he saw Morris coming. He did not expect the level of force in the foul. It's all about that line between being a man, letting somebody see you coming versus going and hitting somebody in the back. And that's where I draw the line. And, it's not a fuzzy line for me. It's a very hard line in the sand that you don't cross that. So,
you know what's crazy also is that Markieff only got 20,000 more than Jimmy Butler, who was nothing but just a pest the whole time. So I get it.
By the way, did you find it interesting? We talk about players not talking to the media. Did you find it interesting that part of that fine with Jimmy Butler was because he refused to talk to NBA
and I want to fill you in on that. So I spoke to someone close to Jimmy Butler, and I said, why didn't Jimmy talk and just get it over? And the person texted me back, because you know what snitches get. And so, Clay, I texted back with the picture. I know, they get s'mores.
What?
Exactly.
All right, we're going to end on that one because we're not going to get
no stitches. No, and you know what? Again, for Jimmy, I think that was his way of standing up for the team. But that's, to me, you know what? Snitches get s'mores, so I'm going to leave it at that. Nice.
So we're going to talk a bit more about this, but I do want to hit the basketball side of this.
Please.
They have a game coming up tonight against the Lakers, and this is not the same Lakers team that we saw last year for a variety of reasons. We're going to get to this game, and I also want to talk about the aftermath of this, Ira, and that famous picture that you saw from, I believe, a Denver Post photographer that's kind of gone crazy. And to me, I made a comment on social media that I want to get to on that. That and so much more coming up right here on Inside the Paint. Welcome back. And yes, that is true. We just updated from Prodigy to AOL. Every time. It gets me every time. So, Ira, the aftermath of this thing.
Can you log off again? Because now you're on the left side. What's going on here?
I'm sorry that we're not getting your good side.
Actually, I have to get the sun on the other side now. Hey, I got up in time to shave. I feel good about the day.
That's it. Look, man, if I were out on the West Coast right now, I wouldn't be doing that either. Hey, guys, make sure to drop your comments, your questions here. We've gotten to a few of them so far. And this is a hot button topic, and I think you guys, I like kind of having this variety of opinion here and going back and forth. And by the way, please make sure to hit the like button. You guys have been fantastic with that. Helps us out a lot. The downloads, everything, it's been fantastic for us. So, Ira, I want to talk about really quickly, we'll get to the Lakers game in a moment, this West Coast swing, but I want to talk about the aftermath of all of this. And there was a picture that has become, I tell you, it's gone viral. And what I said was, this is the picture that I want to see on Championship Alley if indeed the Heat find a way to go on and win the NBA championship. And it's that picture of the Heat core being held back. And it's they're in the tunnel. They're looking for Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets, and it's after the game. And Ira, what I found interesting about this, and Sean, if you're with us, you can find this. It's on my Twitter account. What I found interesting about this picture, Ira, it's not like you've got just Udonis Haslem up front, and I say just Udonis Haslem, but somebody who isn't playing major minutes. You've got the Heat stars, quote unquote. It's Jimmy Butler. It's Kyle Lowry. It's Bam. I would say I love that Caron Butler is up front and center. You can only see like half of his face, but I mean, you've got an assistant coach who's up there. And then my favorite is Dwayne Dedman just standing in the background with a towel. It's like Dwayne Dedman is saying, just FYI, if you get through those guys, you gotta see me next.
He looked like the Undertaker almost, yeah.
Yeah, and here's Sean bringing it on. This is great. So you see on your left right there, there's Kyle Lowry. You see right behind him, it's Bam. On the far right, you see Jimmy looking over everybody's shoulder, trying to see who he can get to. You can barely see half of Caron Butler's face right there. Then you got Dwayne Dedman in the background. And again, Dedman's my favorite. I just think that's a fantastic cherry on the sundae. But Ira, to me, the fact that it's your stars who are front and center with this thing, and an assistant coach, and a role player who they are defending, it's kind of the opposite of typically what you see. We've talked about hockey a lot on this show, where you have that one enforcer, and it's his number one job to protect the star. And you know hockey better than not, but who was the one who was the enforcer for years for Wayne Gretzky? Do you remember that?
I don't have the name right now. So
yeah, but it was in Edmonton. I mean, they had somebody who, like, if you got anywhere near Wayne Gretzky, they go after him. The fact, Ira, that it's the stars, to me, like it's these guys saying, we are going to stand up for anybody on this team. It's not just somebody who's going to go out there and score 15, 20 points a night.
And also, Sean, if you can bring the picture up, and Clay, you know who that is who's holding the players back, right?
That's Andy, right?
That's Andy Ellisberg, the Heat GM. This is when it is good to have a mountain of a man as your general manager. because he is probably bigger than anyone in that picture, maybe shy of Bam, but even then, Andy's pretty tall also. So he was the one. This is the way the situation works at Ball Arena. The Heat exit the court opposite their bench through one tunnel. The Nuggets enter through the other, but then they sort of come together. So right beyond where Andy is standing, if you go forward in this hallway, maybe 20 feet, that's where the Nuggets locker room is. They purposely have them leave opposite sides, even though they get relatively close, and Andy knew that. So that's the door that remains closed. On the other side where the players are, Heat locker room, behind Andy, going backwards here, about 20 feet is the Nuggets locker room. I give Andy all the credit in the world for being in that place at that moment, because this Heat team, with Udonis Haslem not playing, with Victor Oladipo sidelined, with Kazak Pallet deemed not playable, and Marcus Garrett in the G League, they couldn't afford suspensions. They couldn't afford, number one, guys coming off the bench. Look, the league went through that, and this is important, Clay. There were no fines or suspensions for guys coming off the bench. You leave the bench during an NBA scrum, just walk a foot on the court. Heat fans go back in the day, know about P.J. Brown and what happens and stuff like that. So since all the penalties were adjudicated, we know the Heat's off of that. But if any Heat player went any further in that hallway, they probably would have been suspended, and even more when it comes to fines also. So I give Andy all the credit in the world for playing maybe the best defense the Heat played in Denver that night, when he was the one who got back in transition and made the stop in that case and kept it away. But you know what? It's just like we were talking before, this sort of, I don't want to say phony tough guy. UD calls them studio gangsters, going back to, Tyler Hansborough and players like that, the pretend tough guys. Don't do that after the game in the hallway. If you got a statement to make, do it on the court with your physicality, with your rebounding, that Denver is not scoring every single basket at the rim, and be more physical then. So to me, that to a degree was show. I love that the Denver Post photographer was able to capture that. The photography room is actually about 3 doors down from there. So he had a good vantage point where he was coming back and boom, hey, look, there's the Heat guys, click, click, and he got it. No one else did. And I guarantee if I would have taken that picture, I would have caught holy hell from the Heat for invading their privacy. So good for someone else and good for Ira in that case. But you know what? Enough with the tough guys and tough talk and Jimmy and I'll meet you behind and we'll see the Jokic brothers in Miami on the 29th. Show it on the court. Be tough guys tonight against Anthony Davis. Be tough guys tonight against whoever the Lakers are starting, the Kent Bazemore's and their fill-ins and the Russell Westbrooks. Enough of the show, enough of the bravado. The Heat had none of that during the game against Denver. Bottom line is, Clay, right now, the Miami Heat have lost 2 of their last 3 games and survived the other game after a fantastic comeback by the Jazz by 3 points. They got to get back on the right track.
Yeah, and to put a cap on this thing, by the way, this is why we love you guys. Somebody pointed out that looks like it's Malik Allen instead of Caron Butler. I thought it was half of Caron Butler's face, but maybe it is Malik Allen. Either way, the fact that you have somebody in that position being there front and center. So thank you guys for pointing that out. I'll say this about the fake tough guy thing. You have to be smart. And you can call it fake tough guy because I'm seeing this a lot, and this is what I don't agree with. You can be tough and not cost yourself a 20, 30 game suspension, which, look, if Jimmy Butler runs over and he starts punching people, you're talking about losing him for a good portion of the year.
You're getting Artest-like,
I feel like as stars, the players did a good job of towing that line between having their guys back and making sure, because you said, if they had gone any further past Andy, you're not talking about 20, 30 game suspension, but you're talking about something of a suspension. It's not going to be pretty. So I feel like you have to toe that line. It's not being a fake tough guy. It's being smart, but you're not going to cost your team moving forward. Now, I do agree with this point from you, Ira. Show it on the floor. And that was an ugly game. It was a brutal game. It was 2 out of 3 where the Heat did not look like the Heat team that we've seen this year. And I think you can if they come out tonight and they blow out the Lakers, which, by the way, I think they need to win this game and win this game handily. That's a Lakers team without LeBron. It's a Lakers team that's still figuring out how to play with Russell Westbrook. Anthony Davis is probable, but he's still not 100%. Still a great player, but still not 100%. And it's a team that lost some key contributors. Just seen a guy like Alex Caruso going to Chicago and playing really well out there. This is not the Lakers team that we've seen in the past. And when you look at this road trip, Ira, I think you'd agree with me. this is probably the second most winnable game on this road trip behind the Oklahoma City game. And look, I know it's a fool's errand to kind of play this schedule game, right? But I would say the game at Utah, probably the toughest. The game last night, probably second toughest, and the game against the Clippers, probably third. And now you got to beat a Lakers team tonight, coming off what happened the other night, and you got to show that real toughness on the floor to make what some people are calling the fake toughness seem less fake.
And you know what, Clay? I was looking about this, and it's something I might write in my Sunday column. I think the NBA is really good this year because there's so few gimmies. And at the beginning of the year, I would have told you Cleveland's a gimme, but man, they're playing well. I know Colin Sexton's injured. That changes things. But when I looked at his schedule, you know what? They're still going against Anthony Davis tonight. He can single-handedly beat you. They're still going against Russell Westbrook. He can single-handedly beat you. They're still going against Paul George tomorrow night. He can single-handedly beat you. There really are very few gimmies in this league. Even coming home next week for 2 quick games before going back out for a 4-game road trip, they have the Pelicans. Yes, Zion Williamson isn't playing, but Brandon Ingram can single-handedly beat you. And the next night, Bradley Beal can single-handedly beat you.
I'm just reading the comments.
I can tell you were interested there.
I mean, we have a celebrity in our midst. Can you read the comments?
I cannot without putting on the glasses.
Let's just say that there is somebody who claims to be an adult film star in our midst. Sorry, I got to get past that. Please. You're right. There are no gimmies. And you mentioned Cleveland, and look at what they're doing with Ricky Rubio. All of a sudden is like the key to a team going from being awful to being truly respectable.
And Mobley, the rookie, has been terrific. Again, on this trip, maybe Oklahoma City, because they're below the salary floor. They're playing for the future. They're doing this game of we're going to get a gazillion picks, never actually use them, but keep pointing to the future. So you could look at that game. But this league, you have a test every night, and I think the Heat have to learn it. And honestly, to this point, when the going has gotten tough for the Heat have capitulated. We saw it against Boston. We saw it against Denver. Indiana. They had one comeback against Indiana. They came back a little bit, but even then, in the overtime, they were terrible. One of the worst overtimes ever for this team. So I need to see that resolve. I need to see that when I'm watching a Heat game, and if they are down 5, 8, 11 points in the first half, that there's a resolve to make it more of a game. Utah showed that to us on Saturday at FTX Arena. They didn't quit in the middle of the fourth quarter when their deficit was 19. They said, we're going to show some fight. We're going to get ready for next Saturday's game coming up now this Saturday. And you just like to see a little bit more of that. I don't know what chat you're reading, though.
No, the great adult film star Peter North is dropping comments in our chat right now.
Or someone claiming to be. Does he have the verified mark?
I'm sure it's 100% him. Look, so I agree with you to this point. We have not seen this Heat team show it yet. I think the counter to that, to be fair, is it's still extremely early in the season. And so they're going to have opportunities to show that. I think the Indiana and Ira, there are ways where you could write off what happened. Like you could look at if they find a way to come out tonight, and let's say it's a close game in the fourth quarter, and Jimmy Butler wills you to a victory, or tomorrow night for that matter, then you can say, okay, maybe those games against Indiana without Kyle Lowry, the blowout loss to Boston, and the terrible game in Denver, maybe those are the exceptions as opposed to the rule. But the exceptions are starting to add up, if that's the case. And so it's time for this team to go out and show it. I think they built up enough equity early in this season that you can at least give them the opportunity to prove that. But this is a trip where you're going to have to prove it. And look, the Jokic, Markieff Morris thing aside, 0 for 1. That was an ugly game up until that point. They were not the tougher team. And look, I think they have been for just about every other game this season. They're rebounding much better. But they got to show it tonight, and they got to show it against. You're right. I mean, Anthony Davis is going to be the best player on the floor. And yet, the next 3 or 4 best players on the floor. I'm not a Russell Westbrook guy at this point.
I'm still afraid or concerned about Russell Westbrook because I think he still is capable of moments. And I think it's actually going to be harder for Russell Westbrook when LeBron plays and he has to play as a third wheel than when they could say, okay, AD's our big guy. You're the entire perimeter game. We still have so many guys with injury. Taylor Horton-Tucker is out. He's not playing. Kendrick Young has yet to make his debut. Trevor Ariza is out. So I worry a little bit about Westbrook also in a game like this, that it's sort of, hey, do whatever you want. Go Washington on them if you have to. So that's a concern of mine. And Kyle Lowry's coming off a scoreless game, which you would almost think is impossible. And so I'm wondering what his, sort of his step back is after that. Does he assess what went wrong? Does he say it's just a one-off? But more than anything with the schedule, and you talked about the Heat getting on track, their schedule is so road-intensive early. Again, 9-game trip. They come home for 2 games, and it's a back-to-back at FTX Arena against the Pelicans in Washington. Boom. They're right out for a 9-day trip again where they go to Washington and Detroit and Minnesota and Chicago. Come home for a couple of games, and boom, they're out for another East Coast swing. Clay, if they can just remain afloat through the first third of the season, there's going to be payback at the end. When all those other teams are playing their road games, the Heat, you will see on their schedule of all those home games in March and April, so they can make up ground. They just have to stay afloat. Getting that early sort of hedge they had with the good early record is going to help, because the next 3 will be tough. Again, they'll be playing the Clippers on the second night of a back-to-back. The Clippers played last night right over here at Staples Center. They're off today, so they'll get a somewhat tired team. Then the Heat going back to altitude after playing in Denver and then going up to Salt Lake City. So it's going to be rough. They built up enough equity, but they cannot afford nights where there's only one good player. Jimmy Butler was terrific in Denver. Bam was not. Kyle Lowry was not. Tyler Herro was not. That's not how this team is built. That's how the teams were built when Jimmy Butler was in Chicago and to a degree in Minnesota. Here, if you have a big 4, and I think we can include Tyler Herro in that right now, you better get at least 2 and probably 3 of them near the top of their games.
And I would say, going back to when this road trip started, I felt like they could go 2 and 3 on this trip and still feel really good about who they are moving forward.
Feel good, not really good, but feel good. But again, it's when the losses come.
More that, I think they're going to be underdogs in 3 out of these 5 games. They were underdogs in Denver the other night, correct?
Right.
So I think they're favored tonight. I believe they'll be underdogs tomorrow night. They'll be up in the air. And then obviously, you can still feel as though you're on the trajectory that you were on before the trip. But I'll say this, because of what happened in Denver the other night, both over the first 46 minutes of the game and also with 2:19 left to go in the game, I feel like the spotlight's going to be a little heavier tonight. And the Heat aren't just going to go out there because they're playing the Lakers and because it's on national TV and because it's a team that potentially down the line, maybe you meet in the NBA. It's because they have to show that they're not going to lay down after what happened the other night, both for the first 46 minutes and also the 2 minutes after that.
And they've lost 2 of the last 3. And all of a sudden,
that's true too.
A team that loses 3 of 4 and is playing on the second night of a back-to-back, I don't know if it sets off alarms or whatever, but it sets off concerns. Look, Clay, the way they played through their first 7 games of the season, if I would have told you the Heat are going to have a stretch coming up within a week, they're going to lose 3 or 4, you go, come on. These guys are the hottest thing going. Everyone has them at number 1 in their power rankings. They're going to the NBA Finals, for God's sakes, when Victor Oladipo comes back. So, I think it'll be really interesting. If you have to marinate on a loss to the Lakers, sitting in your hotel room over there in Beverly Hills, and then have to come back against the Clippers with losses in 3 or 4, that'd be a big concern. Not critical mass. We're still in November. But reason for concern, you bet. And remember, Bam Adebayo and Tyler Herro are questionable for tonight with minor knick-knack injuries. That injury report was pretty interesting last night. I went to look at it just to see what Markieff Morris was going to be listed out with, and it said whiplash. But all of a sudden, I'm like, whoa, Tyler Herro? Whoa, Bam Adebayo? I didn't expect that. So I'm not sure we'll get clarity in shoot-around. I'm not sure how this goes, pregame, whether Eric Spoelstra tells us. It's going to be really interesting tonight at about 9:30 p.m. when the starting lineups come out, just to know for sure who is in and who is out.
One more thing I want to talk about, Ira, and maybe we'll talk about this more on the other side, but the Duncan Robinson thing is starting to become a little bit of a concern to me, and it's for this reason. I think, and I was out there at shoot-around before the Boston game last week, and Duncan was asked about the new basketball. And Duncan, you could see the look in his face, he knew the question was going to come at some point. Right. And he basically said, look, I know if I say anything other than what I'm going to say, that it's going to blow up somewhere. So all I'm going to say is that it's different. It's something we have to adjust to. I'm not saying it's worse. I'm not saying it's better. But he's not the only one who's struggling to this point. Paul George has struggled shooting the basketball. And it's been something that's come up, that the ball is a reason why. James Harden. I do think James Harden, part of that is the new rules,
yeah,
that are getting him. Plus, there was an article, I think, by Mark Stein that kind of basically pointed out that Harden looks old right now. CJ McCollum, head of the Players Association, has basically said he's going to present to the league. He's going to look into this a little bit. And he even had to tweet out later a clarification saying, look, I'm not saying this is the reason why he said, I'm missing shots because I'm missing shots.
Right.
But it's become enough of a thing around the NBA.
And Damian Lillard also, who's been horrible this season. So that's another guy. Again, the league said it's the same leather. They use the stock that Spalding did from recent years, so there shouldn't be any difference. Maybe it's mental also, that it just looks different like that. But yeah, when I talked to Duncan Robinson earlier in the season and did a story in the Sun Sentinel, he said the same thing. He said, yes, it's different, it's tangible, and we have to make it work. So I think that's part of it also. I think Duncan's shots are so open that he's missing that I find it hard to believe it's the basketball, because it's the same size ball, the same size rim, and not the same results.
And if it is mental, if it is indeed mental, it's the type of thing that as a shooter, once they start going in, they can start going in a lot. And we saw that last year with Duncan. I mean, he went through some stretches where he wasn't very good.
Yeah.
And then he would go through some stretches where he caught fire. I do think it's interesting that, as you said, the shots are open. And I want to talk a little bit on the other side of this about, there's a Ringer article out right now that praises the Heat a lot and kind of dissects why some of those shots are open. And the bottom line is, if those shots are open moving forward, and if this article is correct, they're going to continue to be, teams are going to have to account for that. So we're going to talk about that and a lot more on the other side right here on Inside the Paint. Welcome back, home stretch here on Inside the Paint. We've got Ira Winderman back on his bad side and me on my good side. I may have bribed Sean Stanley to do that. Keep dropping your comments, your questions in the chat. I mentioned this before the break, Aaron. We're going to talk about the upcoming schedule a little bit more over this last segment, but there's a great article from Kevin O'Connor from The Ringer, and what he pointed out was something that I found interesting about this Heat team, and he goes through like a bunch of X's and O's stuff, and feel free to read it. It's great, and if you're a basketball geek, it'll kind of help you out a little bit to kind of figure out how this team's gotten better. But Ira, one thing that I found interesting was, he pointed out that what the Heat are doing right now, because they have, you mentioned essentially a big four, and maybe it's a big four in lowercase letters, because it's not like a Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Steph Curry, and Kevin Durant big four. But he said that what this team has right now with those four players, and let's say you can add one more down the line if Oladipo comes back, you have the ability to hunt matchups now. And so what the Heat are doing more effectively this year than they've done in years past is ISO ball. And he said before, they were so reliant on these dribble handoffs and, Goran Dragic getting into the paint, for example, and then finding guys. He said what this team is able to do right now, it's, okay, look, if you get a big man switched over onto Tyler Herro, good luck with how he's dribbling the ball right now and able to get to his spots. So it's basically what they're able to do right now. It's not that you have a Kevin Durant style ISO player who is so good that he can beat your best.
Yes.
But it's as you go down to the third best, fourth best defender on the floor for the other team, your third best scorer, your third best or fourth best offensive player now is significantly better than their third or fourth best defender. Correct. So they're able to hunt where that gap is the most. If your number one defender is bad, Jimmy Butler's going to go at you. If your third best, so I found that interesting in that this team has been so based on ball movement and dribble handoff, and it still is in many instances. But what this team has that they didn't have last year is the ability to hunt matchups, and it's something that's going to serve them well, hopefully, when we get into some close games down the stretch.
And I think you especially see that in the second unit with Tyler Herro. I mean, Tyler Herro's doing a lot of stuff off of ISOs. That's his game. And the way he's getting to his comfort spot in the mid-range, it's that he's not forcing the three. He's not forcing it at the rim against bigger guys. He's doing it that way also. There's been so much written about the Heat bench and how great it is. And I was talking with Anthony Chang of the Herald about this. Yeah, because Tyler's playing so well. In other words, if you take Tyler off that second unit and for argument's sake, put KZ Okpala in there instead, people would be talking about how bad the Heat bench is. The six-man role is important in the NBA, and Tyler's really been important for them because of that. And that's the thing, and this is why I tend to cycle back in my Ask Ira feature at Sun Sentinel, probably at least even once a week. I am so tantalized by the possibilities with Victor Oladipo, Clay. Because if you can get to that point where I can have on the floor, and we've talked about the Heat great defensive stopper team, but if I can have on the court Kyle Lowry, Tyler Herro, Victor Oladipo, Jimmy Butler, and Bam Adebayo, where everyone is live, then like you spoke about that Ringer article, Cooper Moorhead of theheat.com has done one also. It's not only the first, second, or third defender you're picking on, but it might be number 4 and number 5. So I don't think there's a bigger story, a bigger future thought story for the Heat than Victor Oladipo. And here's what's interesting. I was looking around at the trainers because I'm doing a story on Big Face Coffee, and Duncan Robinson now has a new agreement with Dunkin' Donuts, and he's going to help the South Florida Food Bank, which is an awesome thing. Yeah. So I said, why do you think you can compete with Jimmy Butler, when Brandon Gilliam, their trainer, couldn't with Little Face Coffee, got run out of business in the bubble? And then I looked around to find Brandon just to ask him, his coffee business went to crap. How's Duncan going to compete? And I was told something interesting. Brandon's not on this trip. He's been the number 2 trainer on this team. He's back in South Florida with Victor Oladipo. They are working with Victor Oladipo. This is not, hey, if you're not traveling, out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
We're on the road for 9 days. You're in the gym for 9 days. And Clay, it's going to happen. It might be one of those mornings when you're down in the Heat shoot around, and all of a sudden you're just having an innocuous conversation with Max Strus, and he goes, man, it really felt good to see Vic out there again today. Boom. All of a sudden, okay, you can't get on Local 10 because the news isn't on, but you're calling David Seelig or someone over there, and you're saying, I got to get this online right away. I think that's how it's going to happen. So my question is, does it happen in December? Does it happen in January? That's the game changer for the Heat. When you and I get closer to the February 10th NBA trading deadline, the March 1st NBA buyout deadline, we're going to be throwing all these names around. But if you bring Victor Oladipo back, and anything close to Victor Oladipo, I don't think another team can match that with a personnel move.
Yeah, Ira, I don't want this to get buried. I think that's pretty significant news that the Heat's essentially number 2 trainer, if you want to call him that. I don't mean to assign any sort of is staying almost full time with Victor Oladipo to make sure that he's getting the best. You don't do that for a player that you don't think is going to contribute heavily at some point down the line. So I don't want that to get buried. I think that's a fairly big story, and I think it kind of circles back to what we've talked about the last couple of weeks, which is, does this team need to go out and add somebody? And I've been of the belief that, with Oladipo, it's kind of, I felt like you treat it as a bonus, that if and when he comes back and if and when he plays at a high level, it's okay, great, what a great surprise, but you have to operate as though that's not going to happen. And so my thinking this whole time, and I think I'm still there, even with your news nugget there, is that you have to be proactive in making sure, especially the backup point guard spot, is solidified moving forward.
Yes.
But if Victor is getting closer, right? Because I think he's somebody that can come in and fill that role. Not that he's going to be your point guard, but if you need somebody who's going to come in and defend, handle the ball, and take some of the pressure off of Jimmy and Bam in a situation where maybe Kyle Lowry is out, he's somebody who can do all of that. So I'm glad you said that. I think that's really interesting moving forward, and I do think that kind of changes. Victor Oladipo's status will impact how Miami attacks the deadline, how they attack buyout options, how they attack that backup point guard position. And I feel like this, and we've heard this over and over, Ira, Mickey Arison is perfectly fine going into the tax for a championship team. This team, despite 2 of the last 3 games, has shown at least enough to where they at least warrant that consideration. If they're playing this level of basketball as we get closer to the deadline and at the buyout option, and the Heat don't make a move, that tells me that if Victor Oladipo isn't on the floor yet, it's coming quickly.
And if Victor Oladipo comes back, you don't have to go into the tax because you don't have to add a single dollar on your roster there also. And Clay, that's why it's really important to get a tangible sample before the trading deadline to know what Victor Oladipo is or Victor Oladipo is not, so you can move forward. Is he 75% of himself? Is he 50% of himself? Is he a guy who can come back and just make shots for you? And to know that going forward, that was a real under-the-radar kind of move they made, bringing him back at the minimum, and now they get to judge. So now the question is from Victor Oladipo, which means more to him this season? Showing what he has so we can go out and get a free agent contract, or not showing what he doesn't have, because if he comes back and he's not himself, he's had his last big contract. He turned down the big money, I think 80 million or something like that in Indiana. He didn't re-up. He turned down 40 million plus in Houston when he didn't re-up. Now he's making 2.5 or so, and that could be it. So I'm curious to see where he is mentally also. People ask me, how is he going to fit in with Tyler playing so well? Clay, you know this. You could never have too much talent.
No.
If the Panthers are rolling out a great fourth line, it's not a bad thing. If the Heat are rolling out a great ninth man, it's not a bad thing. So I think Victor Oladipo, almost every show we do now on Pallet Rock City Inside the Paint, I think almost has a place in the show, this sort of Vic update. I'll be curious to see pregame when I get back to South Florida next Wednesday and Thursday when they have that back-to-back set, what he looks like even pregame. Is he out there shooting? Is he out there doing something? The Heat hate that. The Heat have always said concentrate on who's playing, not on who's not playing. Yeah, no, I'm going to concentrate on who might be playing. And like every other media guy these days with my iPhone, trying to send out as much video on Vic as I can.
Well, and that's what they have to do. That's what the players in that building have to do. Like they have to focus on not just the next opponent, but the next film session, the next practice. It's always gotten me, Ira, and you'll see this on like message boards or if you tweet something about Victor Oladipo, fans will say, "Oh, don't say that. We got to worry about the Lakers tonight. We got to, you don't want to distract." We don't play. We don't we do, but it's ugly and we look like in my case, a 42-year-old guy that never could jump and still really can't jump. But our vision and what we talk about doesn't matter when it comes to the distraction of the team. It is absolutely, if you're a fan, if you're looking long-term at this team, it is absolutely an important aspect, an important piece of this puzzle, not just for what this team may do in the playoffs, but even before then, if they decide to make a move. All of that has to be factored in. Last 5 minutes of the show, Ira, let's talk about the upcoming schedule. We got the Lakers tonight. What's your read on this game? I've kind of put it out there already. I think the Heat go out and they make a statement tonight. I feel like they're angry and they want to prove not just that the game was a fluke, but that anybody who's claiming that was fake tough guy stuff, I think this is a team that goes in there to LA tonight and tries to prove that they're the team that's going to be the bully moving forward. They're not going to be bullied.
I'm still a little concerned because the Lakers have played like French fried crap also with LeBron being out. So that's a concern that they want to make their own statement. They barely survived their Monday game here. I'm still not sure the Heat have anyone to guard, to cover Anthony Davis. Again, bigger player against Bam remains a concern. And I'm always wary against Russell Westbrook. Hopefully they can contain him. The Heat seemingly in the first five would have the advantage there, but the Lakers are at home. I think it's going to be a challenge. I think if Anthony Davis is healthy and feeling okay, he's had the stomach ailment, I think that's where this game will be decided with AD. Could he go for one of his 40 and 14s or something like that? I think the Heat are going to have to put a lot of pressure on him. I think they're going to have to bring the double team. And I think our friend, the man with the golden arm, Wayne Ellington, could be a factor in this game. He is notorious ever since he left the Heat for loading up. He beat the Heat last season with the Detroit Pistons when he came into what was then American Airlines Arena. So that's a concern of mine also, is leaving the three-point shooters and seeing what Wayne Ellington does tonight.
Here's another thing I want to see. I want to see Bam step up against a true big man. And,
Yes.
I know Anthony Davis is not, he sees himself as a 4. And yet what you've seen when Bam went up against Rudy Gobert, he played well against Gobert, but when he went up against Jokic, he did not. And the numbers are not there. He's still impacting the game.
Right.
But if you're trying to take that next step from all-star to borderline superstar, all-NBA level player, I'm talking all-NBA third team type, you have to bring it against the best players in the NBA. I know he's questionable tonight. Assuming he's able to go, assuming he's good enough to play at a high level, I got to see him play at a high level against Anthony Davis. And if he can just get in Anthony Davis's way, if he can just come close to matching Davis's output, and I know that's asking a lot, but if he can, I think they win this ball game going away. So after this, you got the Clippers the following night. You close out this road trip with another one against the Utah Jazz and then Oklahoma City. What do you think is best case for how this plays out?
I'd like to get to 3-2. I think that would be a good trip for them. So you're probably talking about wanting to get both of these next two if possible. But the Clippers are playing better. Paul George is having an all-star season without any question. Of course, Kawhi Leonard out for the first half of the season, maybe the entire season. Not a lot of depth on that Clippers team, but guys like Reggie Jackson can go off. So you have to keep an eye out there. Be the Morris brothers against each other. Markieff against Marcus. If Markieff can get back, which I guess right now would be highly questionable, but it'll be another case of twins on the court like we had when we had Caleb Martin and his brother Cody when the Heat played the Hornets. I think Saturday would be tough. Utah will be looking for revenge, but the Heat did seem to have a feel and had enough scare thrown in them in that fourth quarter comeback that I think they'll be okay. And then I think when you get to Oklahoma City, it's got to be a must-win. That's just a team that's playing for the future again. If you can get to 3-2, fine, you move forward. If you finish at 2-3, hey, you only lost one game of standings. If you don't win at least 2, yeah, then we'll be talking about the Heat's lost 4 or 5 or something like that, and that's a concern.
All right, we want to thank all of you for hanging out with us right here, and especially we want to thank Peter North for joining the show today. We really appreciate the commentary. He said that he was courtside for the last Lakers game. Prove it to us, Peter. If you're courtside tonight, take some pictures of the game. Pictures and videos of the game, not of what you're famous for. Thanks for hanging out right here inside the paint.
Thank you, guys.
This is the Big O